He told investigators that the tug Ivic performed well during that trip. He arrived in Dutch Harbor a couple of days before the Culloch was due to leave, and he said he was confident they had a good plan, and he and his towmaster John Becker were looking at a window of good weather ahead.
We talked about it in meetings. None of us expect to have seas as rough as we had.
And they did get rough. The Culloch's operations manual says if waves start tipping the vessel more than 6 degrees, the tow should be slowed down. The vessel's logbook says on the 27th of December that pitching happened for hours. And Case said he couldn't remember if Becker discussed slowing down with the master of the tug Ivic or not. At about midday, Case was on his way to a lunch break when he got word that the tow had broken. He told Coast Guard investigator Josh McTaggart what happened next.
Out on deck to look at it. Everybody was informed at that time. Somewhere around 11:30, I believe, the tow line parted, and sometime right after 1400, we got it back on the emergency line.
To your recollection, what actually failed on that tow gear?
Shackle.
A shackle is a heavy metal loop that a chain or cable is fixed to. This shackle was never recovered. It wasn't on the Culloch's gear, and it wasn't at the end of the line when the Ivic pulled it in. This was the beginning of a series of problems that would see tows reestablished several times, the failure of the Ivic's engine, the arrival of more vessels, and a plan to try to get the rig to safe harbor somewhere around Kodiak Island. Then an emergency line to the tug guardsman parted, the storm was intensifying, and the drift toward the shallows was accelerating. It was worse than any situation Todd Case had ever seen, and Barry Strouch of the National Transportation Safety Board asked the inevitable question.
At any point in this, did you believe that your life was in danger?
Again, it'd be hard to say, but if you're drifting toward the bank at 3 knots and it's 3 hours away, yeah, you would wonder.
Well, what did you do, and you and the other crew members do, when you realized that your life may have been in jeopardy?
Well, there wasn't much we could do but wait on other resources to get there. We didn't start crying.
But they might have wanted to start crying when the Coast Guard helicopter pilot told them the deck was pitching so badly that it was too dangerous to attempt lowering a basket to start evacuating the 18 crew members in the dark. They had to wait for first light. Then on December 29th, a couple of helicopter trips removed the crew, and efforts went on to try to divert the drifting rig, and it grounded on the 31st. During this lengthy probe, each witness has brought another part of the story to light. Case was asked to speculate several times and declined, but when Strouch asked him what hindsight had taught him, he did not hesitate.
Knowing what we know now, we know we should have had multiple tugs.
He's never had to be rescued before, he said. When asked if he felt any pressure to leave Dutch Harbor quickly, Case said no, he did not. In Anchorage, I'm Steve Heimel.
The state of Alaska, North Slope Borough, and Arctic Slope Regional Corporation continue to pressure the federal government over its management of the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska. As APRN's Peter Granitz reports, the Alaskan officials testified before a mostly friendly House committee about a bill that would re-evaluate NPRA.
House Bill 1964 would force the federal government to scrap its current management plan and environmental assessments for new ones, and it would require the federal government to hold annual lease sales in NPRA. Congressman Don Young co-sponsored the bill, but was not there to explain his motives for it because he's big game hunting in Africa. Jamie Connell is the acting deputy director of the Bureau of Land Management. She ticked off a list of reasons why the Bureau opposes the bill, including
the timelines required by the bill that may result in shortcuts to public involvement.
Also,
the suggestion that the department pre-approve rights-of-ways on millions of acres of lands that industry may never seek to develop.
Connell says the bill's requirement of scrapping existing management plans for a new one undermines the work the agency has already done. She told the subcommittee on mineral resources the BLM supports oil and gas drilling in NPRA, but that was met with disbelief from a troika of Alaskans who say the federal government is blocking development.
The TIER's record of decision also made the ability to construct a pipeline across NPRA to Pump Station 1 of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline more uncertain.
The concern that the North Slope Borough has is the record of decision that was made on the area that we felt would be better served for leasing and not be made into a wilderness area.
Insufficient meaningful consultation with the native landowners or the municipalities within NPRA.
That was Resources Commissioner Dan Sullivan, North Slope Borough Mayor Charlotte Brower, and ASRC's Richard Glenn. All are in Washington, D.C. this week, pushing the federal government on its integrated activity plan. The future of the legislation is unclear. It needs to pass the House of Representatives, which is likely to happen, and then pass the Democratic-controlled Senate, which is less certain. As for the future of NPRA, the BLM says it will hold another lease sale in November. One last year drew bids from just 2 companies that totaled less than $1 million. In Washington, D.C., I'm Peter Granitz.
Still to come on Alaska News Nightly, an Alaska-based soldier competes in the Best Warrior competition in Hawaii.
The sounds, the battle are real. The sweat's in your eyes. You're running through jungle. You can't see 15, 20 feet in front of you. You don't really know what's happening until you get around the next corner.
Alaska News Nightly is brought to you in part by your local public radio station.
When you've made the decision to stop smoking, whether you've tried to quit before or it's the very first time, there are free and confidential resources available proven successful in helping you quit for good. Alaska's Tobacco Quit Line offers nicotine replacement therapy, confidential counseling, and support services. Because everyone is different, trained quit coaches will tailor a quit plan just for you. For more information, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW or visit alaskaquitline.com.
A massive ice jam 12 miles upriver from Fort Yukon partially let loose early this morning. National Weather Service hydrologist Ed Plum says the ice sheet hasn't broken entirely, but water backed up behind it is starting to move downriver.
With the ice jam partially open and water being released, this is definitely a good situation because now we don't have water just being built up back behind the ice jam. So this will lessen the threat of a sudden release of water coming down the Yukon River and water levels rising quickly in Fort Yukon.
Low-lying areas of Fort Yukon are still seeing some flooding. Ed Plum says communities like Beaver and Stevens Village further downriver still face a serious threat of high water from ice jamming. The National Weather Service and the Alaska Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management flew over the river at Fort Yukon this morning. They will continue to monitor the situation. Another sign of this year's slow arrival of spring, green-up will likely be the latest in Fairbanks' recorded history. KUAC's Dan Bross reports.
It's looking pretty brown around Fairbanks, an upgrade from the white of just a few days ago, but well short of the green normal for this time of year. National Weather Service meteorologist Rick Toman says on average, buds start bursting on trees during the first or second week of May.
But this year is going to be one of the latest green-ups in many years. In the last 30 years or so, the latest green-up has been on May 25th, but we are certain to go past that date this year.
Fairbanks' official late green-up record was set in 1992. Green-up is judged by the Weather Service in Fairbanks by looking at the trees on the Chena Ridge hillside. Toman says the change from brown to green is usually pretty abrupt and hinges on temperature.
The trees need some spell of warm weather to get the leaves to pop out, and we've done some work on trying to estimate that using various temperature statistics, and our current best guess would be that green-up would be about May 28th.
Toman says there's potential for breaking Fairbanks' unofficial late green-up record of May 30th, set in 1964 during a cold spring he says tracked very similar to this year's. In Fairbanks, I'm Dan Bross.
Last night, the Anchorage Assembly voted unanimously to postpone indefinitely an ordinance that would have changed the way public hearings are conducted. KSKA's Dacia Eaton reports.
The Assembly has made a habit of moving public testimony to the end of its meetings, so it wasn't a surprise that they did so with an ordinance meant to overhaul the public hearing system. Richard Evans of Spenard protested and was allowed to testify earlier because he said he had to return to work. He said the ordinance was bad.